Hello, everybody. We're back again. I'm back again, moderating this session, and again, one of my favourite sessions. It's almost as if I had a hand in picking which sessions that I moderated, but delighted to see you all back again. I hope you're enjoying World Sustainable Procurement Day. I suspect we're now starting to gather people on the North American East Coast, maybe even some on the West Coast. So welcome to our North American friends and those perhaps down in Mexico and Brazil as well. We have been following the sun across the equinox now. We started in New Zealand. We had pictures of the Fijian procurement team were happily waving to us once again as we moved through the sun, through Asia, through Africa, Middle East, and everything else. And yeah, I've lost track of what month it is, let alone what day it is, but it has been fantastic. And so many people have participated. We have absolutely broken records for this one. We've only got last year to compete against, but last year was pretty epic. So thank you for all of you for participating in what has been a fantastic day already and will continue long into the night, I'm sure. So now we're going to talk about a topic that is not only close to, I think, everyone in the Sustainable Procurement Pledge's heart, but I think is also something that's really important for procurement. It's also a word that's way overused. I think in every conference session of every conference ever, it has now been uttered. It is the phrase of 2020's collaboration. Now, what on earth does it mean? What is actually its practical application when it comes to procurement? What does it look like? How difficult is it? What should you be doing it? Where should you get it from? And what are we talking about? So in this session, we've got some wonderful people. We've got three brilliant people to be able to talk us through what collaboration means in a number of different contexts. And I'm joined here by Robert Williams of AstraZeneca, Lucas Petersick of Audi, Stephanie Birtles from the Embedding Project, more of who you'll understand a little bit more, and indeed myself. In this session, we're going to cover internal collaboration, what it means for procurement to collaborate internally with its peers. We're obviously going to cover supplier collaboration and what that really actually means. We're going to obviously cover peer collaboration. I think you probably would have heard about and seen that lots already in the sessions. How do you actually do that? But more importantly, one of the things you're going to get a little teaser of is something that's been a real professional collaboration that we've been doing as the SPP with the Embedding Project, which is an opportunity to bring all of that knowledge and content together and make it easier for procurement to understand. So stay tuned for that. We'd love your input. We'd love your thoughts, and you'll get a sneak preview into the future of the SPP as well. So welcome, panel. But before I start, I should say we do want other people's perspectives in this, of course. So do get involved, get in the chat, get in the Q&A. Don't be afraid to say what you think in the chat within reason. We are being recorded, but I do want some interesting views. I do want some interesting thoughts. I particularly want some great examples of good collaboration, whether it's with suppliers or peers or internally. So let's see lots of examples. But we do want lots of questions as well, because otherwise I'll be asking all the questions and we don't want that. So hopefully we'll have a good session. So team, we need to talk about collaboration. One thing that I think when it comes to collaboration, and having spent pretty much all my career focused on collaboration, is collaboration means many things to many people. And one thing collaboration isn't, ironically, because we're about to talk about it, is just talking to each other. Supplier communication or talking with your colleagues, talking at them and telling them what to do isn't collaboration. Talking with them but not actually doing anything isn't collaboration. Collaboration to me is working together with those stakeholders and actually getting stuff done. And I think that is a really important thing. I don't think anyone can claim that you're collaborating unless you actually get something done and put some output from it. I think it's very, very important that we classify that. So that's particularly true with suppliers and peers. But it is important to really make sure that we're distinguishing that from the traditional supplier and internal communication, which is often, would you mind please doing this? Thank you very much. It's more about how can we actually solve these problems together. Anyway, enough of me. Robert, maybe we can start with you. You've been working with your peers heavily. You've done some great work with your suppliers, and AstraZeneca has lots and lots of people and departments to collaborate with. So how do you see collaboration? How do you define it? And why do you think it's important?
I think it's essential for our suppliers to hear one voice as a starter. Imagine that AstraZeneca and GlaxoSmithKline and Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and Takeda and Novartis are all saying different things to suppliers that essentially serve us all. Well, they're never going to be able to move forward. they're not going to know which way to turn. They're going to have too many different asks, and they're going to be focused on meeting asks and, to your point, not delivering change. So fundamentally, we've got to get collaboration to ask the same things of our suppliers. And this isn't any way which is anti-competitive. And it's great that CMA and others have started to acknowledge openly that sustainability, we must act together to deliver this change at the pace in which it's wanted as well. So collaboration and truly working together, really agree with the points you're making there, Ollie. Collaboration, working together is actually about us as a sector doing that. Now we recognise that kind of indirect materials in what we buy, particularly in pharma, that's perhaps easier than when we start to talk about IT and indirect services and consultancy and things which stretch cross sector. But particularly within sector, I think we're really strong in pharma at doing this. And there's something called the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative, which is one of the key collaborations, which has been around for many, many years. There's actually 75 pharma member companies in that, real global spread from Asia to Europe to the Americas. And that capacity building, capability building is really a great start point for setting common standards and really being clear to the procurement question of, what does good look like, and, give us a fixed outcome and meet these expectations. That's really helping suppliers to understand that. So PSCI also has about 1,000 supplier members in there as well. We recently actually published, to your point about not just talking but taking action, we recently published a decarbonisation maturity matrix, because some of the member companies even, but many of the suppliers who are deep in the B2B supply chain, they've never had the conversation with people before. Pleased to say that AstraZeneca are often the first people they've had a conversation with about sustainability. Does make it more difficult. But then, more and more people have that conversation. Again, we're acting together. They're hearing the same messages, not just one customer, but many customers. People can act faster. They build the business case easier internally for change. So that, and I think you might have just been sharing the link there, Ollie, in the chat, but it'd be great to do that. And that maturity matrix is great, not just for pharma, but it's also relevant for other industries as well. It's not so specific that it's not relevant to probably everybody on the call. So well worth looking at in terms, again, of what does good look like if you're at this stage now, how do you get to, what do you need to do to get to the next stage? If I've got time, I'll go on to a couple of others as well, but perhaps we can come back to the SMI and Energize and other things we're doing too.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely come back to you on that. And as I said, I think there's going to be picking into your experiences of being part of those collaborations. And I'm sure a lot of people are either looking on thinking, oh, that's a good idea, or I'm already part of it. But I suspect there's a few people thinking, yeah, but how difficult is it really? Is it really, are you able to get stuff done? So we'll pick into that a little bit in a second. But peer collaboration and supplier collaboration are almost intertwined, aren't they? I mean, that is the reality. I think you most often are collaborating with your peers to make sure that the supplier collaboration is effective and efficient, and we actually all drive the outcomes that we want. Now, I'm joined by Lucas Avaldi, who I have to say I've been really impressed by the work that you've been doing with your suppliers. It seems like, the automotive industry is quite famous for doing good supplier collaboration generally. You have generally suppliers that you're very close to, but it feels like you've taken it a step further with your Act for Impact program. So perhaps you can give us a little bit of a flavour, Lucas, about what you think about collaboration, and then we can come back to your bit of a deeper case study in a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Ollie, for the nice intro. And just let me a little bit elaborate what we are currently doing with the Act for Impact approach. What are the fundamentals, and what are we aiming for the next coming years, hopefully. So basically the Act for Impact program, we launched it somewhere last year. And I think it's kind of a unique supply chain sustainability program at least from an automotive perspective. It's really deep connected to our core values in the code of conduct for business partners. And it's triggered by the ambition to invite our supply chain partners come along with us and create greater sustainability performance in the supply chains around the globe. So that means we are focusing on certain topics which are derived out of our supply chain strategy for greater sustainability. And we are focusing, for example, on sections like people, innovation, and environment. And we are inviting suppliers joining the initiative. That means we are asking for great solutions for potential problems. How can we maybe empower suppliers to create their own solutions? We are created a so-called Act for Impact playbook, for example, which is kind of the backbone of the whole program. If anybody's interested, I can share it in the chat channel. And this kind of playbook is deeply connected to train-the-trainer sessions. So that means we are already have established a training landscape, a kind of a training portfolio from the automotive perspective. And what is important with regards to human rights due diligence, what's important with regards to circular economy approaches, and how can we innovate for change in a responsible way. So that means we put together our best knowledge and already invited suppliers out of our supply chain in a really early stage of the program to give us feedback. I think that's somehow unique. And we created that program, we created that playbook. So that means we invited suppliers from Northern Europe, we invited suppliers from Northern America and from Central Europe, and tried to put ourselves in the shoes of our supply chain partners and received feedback, tons of feedback. And then we grinded really a lot and tried to make it relevant for a day-to-day procedure, not just invented a training material or a concept in the ivory tower, instead of asking them, okay, what are you looking for? What is your pain point? How can we help you as a business partner? And out of that, I think, yeah, something really great.
Have I lost Lucas, or is it just me? Oh, we lost Lucas. Well, maybe we have. There he is. Lost connection. Oh, he's back. He's back.
Okay, he's back. Okay, sorry. Somehow
That's all right.
Wi-Fi is struggling, but now I'm back, right?
That's all right.
Yeah, and we are always trying to create, as already mentioned, real life projects. That means not just educating and capacity building, but instead translating it to a relevant group of stakeholders, trying to find the right project partners. With regards, for example, to circular economy projects just launched last week, major project which is called the Material Loop, where we are trying to save resources and bring them back in our actual value chain for our cars, new cars. And that kind of approach is, I think we are still at the beginning with regards to partnerships, long-lasting empowerment. But I think it's a crucial step to have that common understanding, common values, and really putting hearts and hands and thoughts together for the betterment of the whole industry, right?
Excellent. Excellent. I have put the link to you, or what I think is the right link to the Act for Impact thing, Lucas, in the chat. But do check it. Do feel free to add something as well. And we will obviously dive into that a little bit more. But one thing I think you also mentioned there that really struck me is good collaboration, regardless of whether it's internal with suppliers or with peers, is to walk in their shoes a little bit. You can't collaborate with someone that you can't empathize with. And I think that's particularly true with suppliers, is there's no point trying to collaborate with someone who you can't appreciate the stresses and strains and the challenges and the issues that you've got. And a procurement professional that just pours more and more questions, more and more demands on a supplier to make improvements that they don't understand, for example, isn't helping, and it causes stress and it causes strain. So empathizing with your stakeholder and really understanding what the situation is means you get more trust, you get more collaboration, and all those good things. So the profession of procurement needs to collaborate more, and we are hopefully the living embodiment of that. And as I said, hopefully just days like this help spark the conversation, but we need to act on it as well. So Stephanie, sitting from your beach in Mexico, I believe, on holiday, so very kind of you to do that for. That's really taking one for the team. I really appreciate that. But you've been leading a fantastic project with Robert and many others Sustainable Procurement Pledge champions to look at how the procurement profession can collaborate. Could you perhaps give us a little teaser of that before we dive into it a little bit later?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually been really excited to be partnering with SPP on this. So we are a public benefit research project. We're a global research project. And we've been helping for over a decade to work with companies around the world to develop and curate resources to help them embed sustainability. So everything from how to become a more effective change agent, or how to speak with your CEO about sustainability. And now for the last couple of years, we've been working on curating resources around sustainable value chains and procurement and supply chain. So we were super excited to pair up with SPP to try and identify practices, examples, and resources. We've spoken with hundreds of chief procurement officers and category managers around the world. We brought together this framework. The inner part of the wheel looks at the procurement life cycle. So this is really aimed towards a particular procurement or a particular category manager. And then the outer part of it focuses on all that work around collaboration. So collaborating with the rest of the business, collaborating as well with externally with suppliers and with peers. And so the idea is that we'll be mounting this in the next couple of months. It'll be all ready and available for everyone for free. You can click on a particular practice. We'll give you a sense of what the underlying practices are. We'll provide you with little examples of companies that are already starting to do this. And then we'll link you with the different resources and tools that we've identified that will help you to get there along the way. So the idea is we're just getting some final feedback. We had a really fantastic round of preliminary feedback with the sustainability ambassadors and champions. And we've just made our refinements and edits based on that. We're just finishing up building the webpage and loading up all the content. And so we're really excited to be starting inspiring and supporting change. So if there are any SPP ambassadors and champions on the line that want to help us out to review that final content, they want to suggest examples, including their own, of leading practice and case studies, we can help you write up a case study on what you're doing. Reviewing our content, just let us know. John is here on the chat as well. And we would love to have your help and get this thing over the finish line. So we're very excited.
Awesome. I'm going to come to you in a second, Robert, because I know that your expert eye has been involved in this as well. I know you've been involved in some of the sessions, but just to add some more context to that, the Sustainable Procurement Pledge believes that procurement professionals need to just make it easy to embed sustainability. The knowledge, the insight, the tools, most of them are out there. But it's utterly bewildering to try and find them. You spend hours trying to find them. You spend hours then trying to translate them into procurement language. You then spend hours trying to understand how to actually use them. And so what the SPP is ultimately trying to do is provide a hub, a home of all of the knowledge and best practice and tools that exist, and put a procurement lens over the top of it, so that you can search for it, you can filter it based on language that procurement understands, about the procurement process at stages that procurement understands, so that you don't have to try and translate all of this sustainability jargon that me and my friends over the last 20 years have been messing up and putting together and confusing everyone with. So we're really, really excited about this. And I think the future of the SVP's home of all sustainable procurement knowledge could be looking through this procurement eye, with that lens and that filter to really understand it. So we're very, very excited about it. But it must be built collaboratively with the SPP ambassadors, with procurement professionals. And that's why you should email John. I put his email in there. So poor old John, hopefully we'll get lots of emails now from lots of people willing to help. But Rob, you've been part of this exercise in the early days of it. What have you made of it? What excites you, and what have we got to be careful about?
I think, first of all, it was great to see the real depth and strength of the people involved in each of the sessions. As we went through each kind of stage of the wheel, there was fantastic to meet different people from a whole range of different industries. And I think that will be one of the strengths that comes out of this, is the cross-sector experience. And frankly, probably thousands of years of experience. I almost dare you to add it all up, Ollie, somewhere along the line, that's gone into building that wheel. But that will be the real strength. I think the other one, to your point about lots of material being out there, is the fact that this has been professionally curated through the embedding project in SPP. And that curation of actually what is the most relevant, the most qualified material is hugely important. So we don't go off down channels and avenues for perhaps less pertinent information, less accurate information as well. So I think it'll make it a hugely valuable resource to all procurement professionals. And I think being part of that has also encouraged AstraZeneca to, and Ollie, you know what's coming now, but it's also encouraged AstraZeneca to really get deeply involved with Sustainable Procurement Pledge. So really pleased to announce that AstraZeneca will be joining the League of Champions to further support the work of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge over the years to come as well. We've seen great interest, great benefit already. There's a huge number of procurement professionals across our organisation already members of and ambassadors of SPP. So we look forward to that. But been great to be involved so far, Ollie. Really looking forward to getting more deeply involved in times to come.
Yeah, very kind of you to slip that in. And I've been working on you for a while, Robert. I needed you in my advisory board. I needed you helping Stephanie. So you
Very
were in
kind.
regardless. But no, it was great to have AstraZeneca involved. And you've got a good heritage of this. And we really, really appreciate it. And we hope that there's the procurement knowledge hubs of AstraZeneca, the procurement knowledge hubs of the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative, and the procurement knowledge hubs of the SPP can actually be organised neatly. And we can all find out where we need to go for what information and just make our procurement professionals' lives more easy. So, yeah, delighted to have you. This is turning into possibly a pat on the back fest for all of us, but I think it's very important to recognise it and a huge point. Quick question back to you, Stephanie. In those exercises that you've had with Rob and the procurement colleagues and the things, is there anything that struck you from the way that procurement professionals think, or the way that they need their information and their knowledge, and the way that they're sort of needing it organised, and some of the challenges that they raised that they face today? Was there anything that struck you from those conversations?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing for us has been the point at which a lot of these decisions get made. So if we look especially at that inner ring, when we've been going around thinking about how do you have impact on the procurement life cycle, what we're finding is that a lot of the decisions that are really important around sustainability need to be thought of really early up front. So things that we were putting, for instance, in the contracting stage, or things that we were putting even in the management stage, we were realizing that there were decisions or thoughts that needed to be, seeds that needed to be planted way back at the planning stage, or the even early planning stage. And so, in fact, our planning stage of it has really expanded. And to make sure that people are having exposure to those concepts and exposure to those issues really early on, because we also were finding out that different people in the business and the procurement function might be the ones who engage in the planning work, and that has repercussions then for people who are down the line in terms of actually negotiating the contracts, or even managing and overseeing the work with particular suppliers. So I think that's been a super interesting piece of it. I think the other interesting piece of it that we've been seeing is just even in the last year or so, a real change around the language around competitive advantage. So I think that, a year or so ago, even I would be talking with category managers or CPOs, and they would be really struggling to get the rest of the business to understand that that sustainability can't solely be a competitive advantage, because when you start to dig down into the supply chain, a lot of the changes that you need to make, you may be a big customer, but even if you're a big customer, you might only represent 2% or 1% or even smaller, right? And so your leverage and your ability to get suppliers to participate in the change is still low, even if you're a really big company. And so I think what we're recognizing now is that there is a need actually to move beyond this idea of competitive advantage, and that each individual company is going to somehow win or be more successful by being able to articulate a better narrative around sustainability. And I think that has changed to, number one, is that narrative around sustainability has to include collaboration, what you're doing to try and create positive systemic change. Now that becomes an element of that credibility. And I think now that, especially on the carbon side, now that we're seeing a lot of companies start to set scope 3 targets, we see an alignment where someone else's scope 1 is our scope 3, our scope 1 is someone else's scope 3. And so now it facilitates that ability to collaborate, because multiple players can benefit by one supplier being able to do better on sustainability. And I think that kind of thinking, which has been liberated by carbon, is now extending into a lot of other topics, whether it be modern slavery, or, as we were just seeing in the last session, EDI and social procurement, and a bunch of other spaces. So for me, that's really exciting, and it actually brings a lot of hope, because I think that procurement professionals, we're tired. We're tired of constantly looking for that little bit more in savings. They're tired of constantly, trying to get something a little bit more out of suppliers. So to have a new lens to be able to look through and say, how can we collaborate, not just to get a better deal for my company, but how can we collaborate because it matters to the world and it's going to make a difference, has been a really exciting thing. And that's why I think you're seeing such huge traction and so many people joining and signing the pledge, because it's an exciting space to be right now. And and so we're just happy to be able to help support it.
That's great. And I think those eagle-eyed people who noticed in the agenda that we divided the agenda up into 3 Ps: people, planet, and the profession. And I think personally, I believe that the Sustainable Procurement Pledge is about protecting people, and it is about protecting the planet, but it's also about protecting and helping the profession to flourish. This is about the procurement profession at a time when the procurement profession is perhaps a little bit more famous than it's been in the past because of various crises. But procurement is also having that moment where it feels like it could and should be doing more, and it's been constantly searching for more value. And it's an incredibly talented bunch of people that I think could be respected and encouraged more. So I think I'm glad you raised that, because it is about helping those people. So, Robert and Lucas, I'm going to come to you with a little bit more depth now. Perhaps I can come to you first, Robert, and then Lucas, I'll come to you a bit more about the playbooks. But Robert, obviously people are asking questions in the chat about the practical realities of collaborating with peers. So what's been your experience so far? What are the kind of, what's the warts and all of collaborating with peers? It's all not shiny and wonderful and beautiful. Is there some challenges? I think particularly in pharmaceuticals, you have to be a little bit careful about how you're doing things. But is there any kind of watch outs for those that are looking to collaborate with their peers?
I think it's not easy. It's not easy, Ollie. You're absolutely right. It takes determination, and it takes the right people being in the room. I think that's always the essential thing. And since I joined pharma sector 18 months ago, it's been great to see essentially people in peer roles in GSK and Novartis and others getting there. And I think it's finding those right people to get into a room. I think there's a real commonality of mindset, and that's been hugely positive about how to engage. So if we think about, let me step away from PSCI for a moment to Sustainable Markets Initiative, which has been a CEO-led collaboration that I've been working with our CSO on to implement. Now that's a Chief Executive Officer collaboration, actually the Health Systems Task Force under the Sustainable Markets Initiative, led by our CEO Pascal Soriot, with Roche, with Novo Nordisk, with GSK, and others, and Sanofi. And that collaboration has found real feet in a common purpose. And I think it's having that common purpose that enables the collaboration. So when you think that healthcare sector contributes 5% of global carbon emissions, that's really material. That's bigger than a lot of sectors that people point a lot at. And we're determined to improve that. We're determined to improve that because there's a real positive purpose that we know that climate change, that global warming will result in increased health-related issues. So there's a real purpose there that helps drive that collaboration. And I think identifying that common purpose, I mean, it's a fairly standard, it's not rocket science, this is change theory, but having that is essential. The difficult stuff is always the antitrust regulations, having those, getting the lawyers in the room, getting the lawyers advising correctly and making sure that actually we stay on the right side of what we're able to talk about. It's the not sharing the data about actually which suppliers we talk about and which suppliers we talk with and which suppliers work with us, but acting collectively towards the same suppliers. So absolutely, there are administrative and legal challenges that you need to overcome, but this is a well-trodden path. And as I mentioned earlier, likes of the CMA and the European regulators are getting more comfortable that they expect these conversations to be happening if we're to meet other global and European goals as well. So it's not easy. You've got to have the right people with the right degree of knowledge. And I think you've got to have the strong purpose that can really drive people to proactive action.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. I'm going to come back to you, Robert, as well. There's a few questions about learning from other industries as well. And I know you're relatively new to pharma and have got a huge experience in others. So I'll come back to you on those questions that are being asked about learning from other industries as well. So, Lucas, playbooks. This is the sort of word that I hear more and more these days. This idea of playbooks, the idea of helping procurement and or suppliers to actually understand what they can do, almost giving them the information, getting rid of all of the excuses about what to do. And I'd just be keen to understand what drove Audi to sort of create these playbooks and go beyond the kind of traditional methods of engaging suppliers and asking them for data and doing all of the obvious stuff. So what was the driver behind it, and what do you think the outputs of it will be? What will be the outcomes?
Yeah, interesting question, Oliver. So yeah, first of all, I think what really drove us for creating some kind of a project like the Actual Impact Program, first of all, and out of that, delivering some kind of a umbrella, some kind of a common playbook, as you name it, or as we name it as well. I think it's kind of, we felt the need for let's make the next step. So I think it's basically driven out of that. Okay, what are the next steps related to going beyond a traditional, let's say, risk mitigation approach or compliance-based approach? I think it's crucial to think already a little bit ahead. I think it's also important from a day-to-day procedure to have some kind of a tool or measurement, how to prevent certain things, how to react for, or how to prepare for certain issues as well. But I think it's crucial as well to not to stick too heavy in your day-to-day procedures, but already planning a little bit ahead. And what we initially thought of, what would be great is to prepare first of all ourselves, but as well as we are only that strong as our partners are, to prepare our supplier base for the upcoming days, for the upcoming years. So what are the basic requirements from a legal perspective, but as well from a stakeholder perspective, right? And we ask ourselves, okay, how can we support, first of all, our suppliers during that sustainability journey? How can we give a certain guidance in that kind of jungle of sustainability, which is always somehow, maybe a little bit confusing. And from a personal perspective, we are, as already mentioned, we are still at the beginning somehow. It always feels like there's some new field coming up, some new topics are rising, and for sure we have over 14,000 business partners in over 60 countries. We have a huge diversity, not only from the business relationships, but as well from the maturity of sustainability, knowledge, performance. We have really small companies which are delivering and working for us, and we have partners which are even bigger than Audi. And so that's kind of that spread we are trying to focusing. And therefore we felt it's not necessary that we always are the ones which have to pave the way. Sometimes it's even better just to sit on a panel like today, learn from others, share some knowledge, but gaining some experience even from other industries. And therefore we felt it's necessary to have that kind of roadmap, first of all, from an internal perspective, regarding what are the main topics, what are the core topics from an automotive perspective related to the core business of sustainability in procurement in the supply chain. And then how can we create real action out of that? And that's what we try to create by the means of the Actual Impact Program and by the means of the playbook, help suppliers to help themselves, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, these programs need to be something that empathize with suppliers, but that they want to involve. And I think particularly in automotive, you're surrounded by very clever engineers who like solving problems. If you're surrounded by people who like solving problems and engineers and getting their spanners out and sorting things out, then harnessing that and sort of encouraging them to solve problems together collaboratively with you and your partners is something that needs to be encouraged. It's the same in the chemicals industry. The chemicals industry is full of wonderful chemists who love accuracy, who love developing methodologies and things like that. What a great place to cook up the product carbon footprinting guidelines. As I said, I think if we can harness the capabilities in industries, the things that they're brilliant at, and harness what people are brilliant at in certain pockets, then we can really achieve things with by using and leveraging their skills. Steph, I know you've got some thoughts about justice in collaboration as well. Maybe you can add some thoughts onto this.
Yeah, so as I'm listening to Lucas and Robert, I think the thing that I'm really struck by is the efforts to actually support suppliers. And so we see two pathways that companies take as we look at how they go about trying to implement sustainability in their procurement and across their supply chain. And one is that one is around mandate, right? So if, whether we're taking modern slavery or fair treatment of workers, or how many hours workers are working, or even if we're looking at climate change, one way is to just establish what you see as acceptable and not acceptable, to put it into put it in as a contract clause, and then to try and enforce it. The reality is something quite different, which is that when you get down into lower levels and tiers within your supply chain, your visibility is lower, the resources are lower, people are very, very financially and resource constrained at those lower levels of the supply chain. And as a result, you don't necessarily see a lot of compliance. And in many cases, we're seeing companies set ambitions. If we look at Scope 3 as an example, ambitions that are way higher for their supply chain, like 65 or 75% reductions, and then only 35% reductions in their own Scope 1s, right? So we need to see that as companies start to embark down this process, they have to make sure that they're being fair, that they're actually really taking into consideration, are they getting their own house in order while they're expecting suppliers to do the same? Are they sharing what they're learning? So what Robert and Lucas have been sharing is a really important piece of the piece, is that bigger companies do have a sustainability team. They do have people within procurement that have a little bit of time to think about this. They're doing a ton of learning. And so taking the time, as both Robert and Lucas have done, to capture that learning and to be able to provide it to others is actually a huge piece of the puzzle. But another piece that we're seeing is really important is sitting down collaboratively with your supply chain members and understanding what's possible for them, what would be necessary in order to enable it. So in some jurisdictions, for instance, suppliers would love to get onto renewable energy. It would be cheaper for them. It would be more stable for them, but it's just simply not available, right? And so a big company like AstraZeneca or Audi or Apple, as they're doing can go in and can actually lobby with government and can stress the importance for that region of why it's really important to make investments in renewable energy. So even that advocacy piece can be a really important part of the justice piece. So I think just thinking not just about pushing requirements down, but really going, as Lucas said, and having those conversations with suppliers and understanding what's holding them back. Because often it's not that they don't want to make the change, it's that they're actually really constrained in making that change and figuring out what those leverage points might be. And that's where collaborating then as an industry, and I'm sure Robert can give some great examples of what pharmaceuticals have been doing around water and other topics, that allow kind of that two-way communication between your supply chain and between the large purchasers.
Indeed. The perfect segue, I think, Robert, to talk about Energize. And I mean, we're in danger of bombarding people with collaborations, but it's important to understand that perfect mix. And Energize
Yeah.
is a lesson in helping suppliers on renewable energy and capability.
It has, yeah, and I think beyond the engagement, we've got to remember that first this is a change journey. We've got to engage with suppliers first, and so we shouldn't be afraid of actually the first step is not about delivering change and delivering a carbon reduction. Engage first, then educate, which, as you say, is the first step of the Energize program, and then embedding that change through actual decarbonisation actions. So Energize was set up by 10 originally, it's now 18 pharmaceutical companies who are all members of PSCI and PEG. They came together to say, how do we help our supply chain understand what renewable electricity is? We know it's one of the fastest ways to decarbonise is to move to use renewable electricity. To Stephanie's point, we know it's not available in every market. So what do we do? Well, so we've got to start where it's possible. European markets, North American markets, where you can make that switch, where renewable electricity is and using renewable electricity directly is a very direct opportunity. I used to be a wind farm developer many, many years ago, so real direct experience of that, which we've been able to bring to the table as well. And that's really been helpful for our suppliers. We've now, I think we announced back at COP in November last year that over 2 terawatts of electricity, that's actually more than AstraZeneca uses ourselves globally, but over 2 terawatts of electricity have now signed up as a part of the first cohorts to go to market for new PPAs. Now, what a PPA is, that's where you go and you buy electricity directly from a wind farm or a solar farm. Ideally, that's a new to the planet wind farm or solar farm. That means we've genuinely moved to have more renewable electricity generated than we did beforehand. And these PPA contracts actually really do enable delivery of those projects by underpinning the finance that's needed to build them. So it's a really strong, deep green link. But it's educating our suppliers. We're working with a key company, Schneider Electric, who've developed an education program, and through that, then people sign up to take part in it. Acting together means that more companies can do it as well. If you're a small organization, not only the skills gaps or the knowledge gaps that Stephanie talked about are a barrier, but sometimes credit rating can be a barrier. So again, bringing suppliers together to act collaboratively overcomes a lot of hurdles. Doing it with friends, so to speak, as well, is kind of a key attractor as well. And people doing that then can take those decarbonisation steps as quick as possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Energize is a great example, actually. It's a great example of peer collaboration. It's a great example of supplier collaboration, but it's a good example of collaboration being about doing. It's not just about sort of talking at suppliers, it's about capability building suppliers and signing, hopefully soon, and many more, those VPPA agreements, isn't it? It's about getting stuff done, and it has all the hallmarks. And it's not easy, it's a tough gig. It's herding cats and all of those sorts of things, but it's a great example. And I would expect, and I think we all expect, to see Energize be replicated in a number of other industries very, very soon, whether that's with Schneider Electric or anyone, it doesn't really matter. Other big energy providers are available. Again, I put the link into the chat about Energize. I'd encourage everyone to Google Energize and Pharma and AstraZeneca and Robert Williams to find out what you can find. But there's some interesting stuff out there. I think it's one of the best collaborations that there is. Right, we've got a few more minutes, so we're going to take a few questions now as well. I'm going to get a little bit more specific here. I don't know if you can answer this one here, but Ryan asks, Robert, whether you've been managing to work together with GSK on defining green IT requirements and working on green IT and tech with them. Does that make any sense to you? Does that you got any examples of that?
It does make perfect sense, but it's not what we've been focused on so far, because it's actually not fundamentally the core of our carbon emissions. So the core of our carbon emissions is in our direct materials. It's the chemistry that's used to create our life-saving medicines. So while we are focused on talking to our IT suppliers, like Apple have been mentioned before, or Samsung for mobile phones, or the different manufacturers of laptops that we have, about what they're doing to decarbonize their products, that's very cross-sector. So those discussions with the likes of GSK, with the likes of Novartis, through PSCI, through SMI, and through Energize, have been very much about our manufacturing. That's our core carbon, it's our core water use as well, and so that's where we're focused at the moment, but that will come. So IT, green IT will definitely come, and it's something that we're already talking to our suppliers about across that sector.
Yeah. I suppose I have to mention the Indirect Spend Alliance, of course, which I chair with you, Robert, AstraZeneca, and indeed GSK. And that's looking at helping procurement professionals who are in indirect spend categories, services, tech, IT, to understand both the human rights and the decarbonisation challenges. In fact, we've got a decarbonisation playbook, haven't we, Robert, that we've been building for different categories. And in fact, we do have a workshop coming up in a couple of months with Microsoft, HP and Salesforce to look at the tech industry and how we can collaborate to help them give more insight into what they're doing on both human rights and decarbonisation. So I had to plug that, didn't I? It was inevitable. So thank you very much for that. Another question was from Kate. Perhaps more about collaboration on more human rights issues. I know we've talked a little bit about decarbonisation. So Lucas, Robert, and maybe Stephanie as well. Any examples of where you've seen collaboration on human rights and perhaps learning from what other people have been doing on that? Robert, maybe I'll come to you first.
Yeah, you can do. I think indirect spend initiative you mentioned already. I think that's been a great learning resource, and I think really helpful to share examples. It's a space where there's some really difficult stories that come out, but I think really poignant stories that remind us all that these challenges are not just in certain markets, they're actually global. They can be very local, and that we all need to look out for signs of that and be aware of that in core categories we know about, but indeed across everything. So indirect expenditure initiative has been fantastic for sharing examples and really shining a light on an area which needs more focus. I think other areas, again, PSCI does have a working group on human rights and labour as well. And as part of the responsible sourcing subgroup for that, we look at the sourcing of natural raw materials, which, we get agriculture in the supply chains. It starts to raise the risk profile of some of these issues. So there's great collaboration going on. Again, hats off to the Indirect Spend Initiative to bring different industries together with different experiences. Does it need more focus? Yes, it does.
Yeah. Good question. Yes, and Kate, I think I butchered your question. This is the problem with these platforms, where I can't just invite you in to ask you a question. Oh, that's what I like doing. I know it's risky, but it's good fun. So sorry, Kate, I might have butchered your question a little bit about probably a board collaboration, but yeah, no, Robert, I have to say, human rights collaboration for procurement professionals. Procurement professionals can't be human rights experts. It's incredibly complex. So one thing that, again, some of the insight that will be shared through the SPP, which we've created in the Indirect Spend Alliance, is creating essentially cheat sheets on human rights. So all the human rights risks in their category, the key challenges, the key questions, and putting them into one pages for the member companies of that alliance have been very popular. So hopefully some of that is going to be an example of where procurement professionals can collaborate to share and understand human rights risks a little bit more. So Philip asks about how you negotiate and optimize collaboration when ESG issues have been prioritized differently among the partners. So if different members of the collaborations or different peers have got different priorities and different challenges, how do you make that happen? Any experiences from you, Lucas, on that in terms of collaborating with your automotive peers?
So yeah, maybe just one hint on that, or one maybe some thought on that. No real expertise from a personal approach, but I think it's crucial to always chop the elephant, right? So therefore, I think it's crucial to first of all focus on the common topics. What are the hot topics? First of all, you have to concentrate. Okay, where the highest severity? What kind of topics do we have to tackle first? And I think at the end of the day, I think it's crucial to understand that we are all in the same boat, right? So it's applicable to environmental issues, it's applicable to human rights issues, it's applicable to product issues, right? So at the end of the day, if you are in kind of a collaborative room or initiative, you have to be aware of that nobody will be able to save the planet for yourself or by your own, right? So that's for sure. And therefore, I think it needs that kind of common approach to tackle overarching issues. I think that's crucial. I think partnership is key. And maybe one additional thought on that, I think it's crucial to make a first step, not always talking about what could be the first step, what could be a next step. I think it's crucial to make the first step and then the next step and the next, and maybe already think about from a broader picture, think about in a, let's say, bold vision, but make a first step. I think that's crucial. And that's also applicable to other corporations, and not only accounting for sustainability for sure, but that's from a personal perspective, from my personal experience in the last decade in sustainability. at least. So yeah, I think it's crucial to have that hot topic analysis and then make a first step.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd add to that, Philip, that when you have a very, very large community like the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, or you have the access to peers at a large scale, you will find common ground with people. And I think it's about also being willing to look at the unusual partners. So, I mean, obviously, we tend to industry silo ourselves, don't we? We tend to sort of work in industry silos, but in procurement, you can collaborate around categories. So you can collaborate, Lego and Amazon and AstraZeneca are collaborating in the Indirect Spend Alliance because the category managers buy the same things. They may not make the same things or sell the same things, but they're certainly buying the same things. So I think that's hopeful, certainly a hope of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, that when we have 1 million procurement professionals collaborating by 2030, then you'll be able to find your peers who have interesting ideas and things to share with you very, very easily. And it's about finding that common ground easily. Mint is another example. So you'd never think that GSK, who make toothpaste, and Cadbury's and Kraft Heinz, who make mint chocolate, would be able to collaborate. But they do. And you can get toothpaste and chocolate collaborating because mint is a challenge. In Northern India, there's water stresses, there's corruption. And that is a beautiful way to look through, again, a procurement lens at a problem and realize that actually mint and, is a place where chocolate and toothpaste can collaborate. And the buyers of those two companies would never think to talk to each other necessarily about that. So perhaps that's another lens to look through. So conscious of time, I berated other sessions for running over, so I shouldn't do this thing. So final, very, 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 very quick pieces of advice, panel for those listening in. So those listening in, they know they need to collaborate with either their peers or their suppliers more. So very quick final sound bites, and I'll start with you, Steph, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I think it's picking up on your point, Oliver, which is that companies have a tendency to focus within their own industry, and that actually a lot of collaboration around key materials, key ingredients, and also key sourcing regions. So looking at what other players are involved in the regions where you operate, or what other players are involved with the materials, I think is a really great place to start thinking about how to scale up the kinds of collaborations that we need.
Lovely. I keep thinking a pina colada is going to come in from this edge of the screen in your in any moment now. You've got it on order. I could do with one. I know that much. Lucas, your final thought for the audience on collaboration.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe one sentence or two sentences only. So I think from an internal procurement perspective, it's crucial to understand that every purchase has an impact, and every purchasing member can create a potentially positive impact. So I think it's basically it. So make a positive impact by the means of the purchase. I think that's a strong message, hopefully. And everybody is in the same playground, on the same playground, and can create something really powerful.
Excellent. Great point. And we are looking for our first ever automotive SPP champion, by the way, Lucas. I must talk to you afterwards to get your insight and get your involvement in. I mean, Audi, surely, got to be the leader in this space. So we'll catch up again soon. But finally, Rob, I have to leave it to you. Again, a critical part of the team now. What are your final thoughts for everyone?
Well, there's a phrase that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I think that's fundamentally why collaboration is important. I think the other aspect is that collaborations can communicate to those supply chains much more loudly. So one voice is loud, many voices are louder. And those many voices speaking the same to the supply chains enables them to act faster. So pick up the phone to those friends in different organizations, start the conversations. A collaboration starts with two, as you've done many, many times, Ollie, and then it grows from there. So I think it's act now, not tomorrow.
Brilliant. I've never heard so many wonderful sound bites in 10 seconds there. You got more than I have. That's brilliant. That's why you're part of it, Rob. That's brilliant. Huge thanks, panel. I think we've covered a lot there. That felt like a really meaty session. I think we covered a lot. Huge thanks to all of you. Huge thanks to all of you listening in. I have no idea how many hours are left. I daren't look at the clock, but there's still some way to go, and I'm still enjoying it. I hope you are too. And we'll see you again very soon. Take care.